Hello and welcome. You are listening to the Gay with God podcast, a safe place for us to share our stories and support one another. How long did we know? What challenges did we face? Did we lose our faith? When did we find our way back home? Or are we still searching? The stories you hear on this podcast will melt your heart and strengthen your belief that in God, all things are possible, and you can be authentically gay with the God of your understanding. I am your host, Midge Noble, and I am very honored that you are here. Hey everybody, this is Midge, and you are with the Gay with God podcast, and I'm so excited to have a returning guest. So I'm going to read her biography, and then we're going to talk about the book that we learned a little bit about last time, but now it is out, and it's out, like all of us. We're all out. Not all of us, but but I want to learn more about the book from her, and I've been reading it. I love it. I'm like almost finished. There's been like an election and I got behind, but anyway, it's a wonderful book. So Erica Vogel, she, hers, is the author of Advice from Your Trans Aunty book, or she may say auntie. Anyway.
Auntie. I use auntie.
Yay! Yeah, me too. Okay. She is a queer transgender woman, parent, spouse, public speaker, and mentor. Frequently referred to as resilient, fearless, authentic, and inviting, Erica meets people where they are with love and grace. She is passionate about improving the quality of lives around her and creating safe and inclusive spaces for LGBTQIA+ people to thrive within. Erica is an award-winning senior product manager by trade in financial technology. She has more than 20 years of experience in design, strategy, and product management for some of the world's top companies. She is married to a wonderful queer woman and is a proud wife and is the parent of both adult and tween-aged children and one hefty cat. Her family is full of LGBTQIA+ representation as well, with members that are lesbian, gay, transgender, queer, and asexual, aromantic. And as I mentioned, Erica was on the show previously on March 20th, 2024, and we're going a little bit deeper dive today, one to highlight her book and also to talk about there's been a lot going on in our community lately, and we need to have information, and you guys need information, especially if you identify as trans. We want you to know that Erica, she's got all the deets. She's got everything. And this book, let me just say, Erica, that this book, even though I'm not trans, it is not just for the trans community. If you are really passionate about being an ally for the trans community, this book is an essential book. It should be on every shelf of every bookstore. PFLAG, y'all, anybody, you guys need this book. I'm holding it up like people are going to see me. So first, I would love to know, Erica, what inspired you to write this book? Because I know it's informational, but you give so much personal information. It's like
Mhm.
it's like an info memoir. It's so
Yeah.
great.
I've been looking for the right phrase for this book, and I think info memoir might be it. Right. When I, First of all, when we last spoke, I think you said it was March. I was still writing this in
Yeah.
March. I don't think I turned this book into my publisher until literally May 31st. That was the deadline, turned it in May 31st. And I was working till midnight the night before. So at that point, when I spoke to you, I was probably just over halfway.
Okay.
Right. So a lot of time has passed since then, and then we've had all of the work to publish a book, which is mostly a lot of me sitting around waiting for someone else to work on this book for 6 months, um, which is just nerve-wracking. Okay,
Yes.
so inspiration for this book comes from a couple of different things. Uh, since my transition, I have spent a lot of time talking to people um, about being trans, about being non-binary, about being LGBTQ in and out of the workplace. And I get a lot of questions about what it means to be trans from trans people and from people who are not trans.
Mm-hmm.
And one day I was having lunch with a really good friend of mine that I used to work with, a gal named Shika Chuvolka. She's Indian. And we were pretty tight, right? And so she was getting ready to leave, I think the next day, to go back to visit family in India for 6 months because she had like 17 weddings to go to from all of her friends, and then was going to go to China and Japan,
Mm.
all this stuff, because she was taking like a sabbatical. And at lunch, I was talking to her like, I really want to write a book, but I'm not sure what to write it about. I don't know that we need yet another trans memoir. There's a lot of good ones out there. I'm not really sure. And she said to me, Erica, I've watched you answer people's questions up close for 2 or 3 years at this point, and you're really good at it. You're really good at giving people a 5-minute answer to a
Mhm.
complex question that leaves them with a sense of direction right about that.
Mhm.
And that kind of blew me away,
Mhm.
right? I was like, oh, you mean do the thing that I do already? She's like, yeah, because that way more people can experience what you do. And I was like, oh, well,
Yes.
that's better than me going to a million conferences to talk to people one on one. And it worked really well because I have a family. I come from a family of authors. My grandfather and my uncle are both were both academics. They're both literature professors. They
Mm.
both have books. My mother was a poet, though she never chose to publish. I was raised with book reports due to my mother and grandfather during the summers when I wasn't in school. And then I spent my whole career in tech writing all day long stories, how we're going to
Oh,
build this, how we're
nice.
going to build that strategy. So, like, I've always just written, but I never really knew what to write about outside of like business. I didn't want to do a business book.
Mm.
So, Shika comes along at the right time when I'm really thinking, like, I'm ready to write something. And I had spent the previous year at this point in time, like, practicing the craft of writing something that's not an email or a strategy document. Like, I knew I was going to write something. I knew it was coming soon. I didn't know what it was, but I set out to practice writing. So that's how I got ready. That's how I practiced my craft. And then finally, a good friend just dropped this great idea in my lap. That's the inspiration. That's why we're here today.
Well, and I'll tell you, she was right because the way you organized this book and the thoughtfulness that went in it. I mean, it just feels like, I mean, it really feels like it just came from your soul that you went
Yeah.
back in time and thought of all the, of course, all the questions you had, everything you had to explore. And that's why the personal stories in this book that give an example. So instead of giving a made up example, you are built in to to have these
Yes.
examples. And when you used those personal examples, it was so heartwarming and powerful because it's something that people can look to and say, "Oh, that's how that happened. That's how she got through it." And it was
Yeah.
really, really impactful.
I love to tell stories. If you come to a party with me, I'm going to tell you about 17 stories if you were willing to stand still. And I make them fun. I'm funny. You've read parts of the book, you know that.
Yes.
Um, I'm more than happy to tell a funny story right here that's in the book if you want me to,
Yes,
about
please.
how. Do you remember? Have you had a chance to read The Name My Mother Suggested?
Yes. I love that part. Please
So,
share.
for those of you who have not gotten this book, my goal is always to give you a sense of direction, not tell you what to do, to help
Hmm.
you understand the agency you have and plot your own course feeling more informed. And frequently, I do that through a story, an anecdote, something that's either mine or belongs to people I know in the community who have
Hmm.
said I could share that story.
Hmm.
So most people in the trans community choose a new name to match their new expression, right? So I'm not going to tell you my old name, but my current name is Erica, as we've all discussed. And at a certain point, I needed to add to that name and sort of really like get firm in that name. So the first time I was asked by my therapist what she should call me, I had three names narrowed down. I can't remember the other two, but Erica was the third and my least favorite, but that's the one that came out of my face. So that's why we have Erica today. Um, but eventually it started to feel like home, like the right name for
Hmm.
me.
Hmm.
So, but I did ask because my mom and I have had she passed recently. We had a very good relationship. She was very comfortable with me being trans. So I was like, you know what? I know my mom told me what she was gonna name me at some point, but I really don't remember. Let me ask her because who knows? Maybe I'll take it. It'll be a nice way to be like, thanks, mom.
Hmm.
Um, so I called her up one day and I was like, Mom, I know you told me, what were you gonna call me? And she said, Oh, I'm so glad you asked. I was going to name you Marinella. And I said, what? Now you can't see my face here, but Midge can. And she can see the expression, which is like
Uh-huh.
utter disbelief at what has come out of her mouth. Marinella.
Uh-huh.
And I said, what? Do I have that right? Now I have to warn you that my mother loves to joke around and have a good time. So I thought this was more of that. So I laughed at her and I was like, oh, ha, that's so funny, mom. But no. And she's like, no, I'm serious. And again, knowing my mother, I was like, no, I don't believe you. And she's like, no, really, I'm serious. And then I knew I'd hurt her feelings. But all I could think about was being referred to as marinara in school, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, well, why? Why that name, mom? I didn't say, look, mom, I'm going to stick with Erica. And I'm not going to take that one, but I do want to know why. And what she told me like really hit me. And it was because her mother is like her hero. She was a nurse in World War II. She was injured in the line of duty. She actually has a picture that was taken for the cover of Life magazine with her being shipped back on a boat, a bunch of soldiers as the only woman like in the medical ward as a patient. My mother went into nursing over basically my grandfather's like refusal because he wanted her to go be an English professor. He had trained her to do that. She was like, no, I'm going to be a nurse. She turned out to be a darn good nurse. And her mother died. My mom's mother died when my mom was 13 from breast
Mhm.
cancer. So like she never got like she always had this sense of reverence around her mom. So I knew, okay, right then it's about Grandma Mary, right? And then the Ella comes from her favorite aunt that looked after her
Mhm.
after her mom passed. I was like, oh gosh, okay, so I've really kind of stepped in it. Um, so what I chose to do after that fact was, well, I need a middle name. So I
Mhm.
took Mary or Marie as my middle name to honor my
Mhm.
grandmother, who has like legendary status in my family. So much so that I almost considered becoming a nurse early in after I was like, what am I doing in advertising? I almost went back to school to be a nurse. So
Mhm.
to honor her how much my mother loved this that I never got to meet. Right. So
Mhm.
that's my middle name. And then my last name actually comes from my wife. When we got married, she is a an academic. She's got 2 books out there, 16 scientific articles out there. She's like, ain't no way I'm taking your last name. I'm published under my last name. And I was like, you know what? I don't really feel connected to my last name. Can I borrow yours? And she said yes. So I took her name.
And I love how you described her in the book. That
Yes.
was really, really good. So I'm going to hold that as a secret. But you've got to
Yeah, go read that.
she toned it down a little bit. You got to see exactly what she said and why she followed her lead.
My wife is amazing
Yes.
and someone that I go toe to toe with when I need to stand in my space, but also like
Yeah.
she gets stuff done, man.
Yeah.
So that's just one story. So trans people need to pick a new name. Frequently, many of us feel paralyzed about that because think about
Hmm.
this. Who gets to pick their own name? Our
I
name is
know.
given to us by someone else.
Hmm.
So when you have to come up with a name, you suddenly feel quite terrified. And I can't tell you how many times I've been asked, is this name good? And my answer is, I don't know you well enough to tell you that name is good for you.
Right. Right.
And so I always give them guidance, which is along the lines of pick a name that feels like home when you say it. Pick a
Hmm.
name that's for you. Like the
Hmm.
rules that I set for my first name was nobody that I was related to or had someone close in my life could have the same name because I didn't want to feel like I was taking their name.
Hmm.
For me, it needed to be age appropriate. So, as a child of the 70s, what's a name I might have been named? Erica is one of those names, right? So,
Yeah. Not the other name.
not the other name,
Nobody would have been
not
named that.
Marinella, which I would have absolutely would have shortened to like Ella, I'm
Yeah,
sure, and
right.
pretended like that wasn't my first name.
And the third thing was, so you're not stealing a name in the 70s and
Age appropriate. And oh, I think it was just that it had to feel like it was
yes.
mine.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wrote
Yeah.
that a long time ago. I'm going
I
off
know.
of memory here.
I know I'm being cruel. Well, and see that's why I love this book because you are so in tune with your own journey, and people are asking you questions, and you blend those two things together, and it just
Yeah.
becomes so important, this book, because it tells everybody step by step in a very non-threatening, very
Yeah.
open way. Yeah, how to get
Fun,
through it.
sometimes
Yes.
serious,
Yes.
sometimes sad. I
Yeah.
do like, look, I'm a person that's been through some stuff. And the whole first chapter of this book, which fortunately for you all is the shortest chapter of this book, is a list of what I have been through to
Yes.
help qualify why you might want to listen to me. The
Yeah.
rest of the book is very approachable. It's you could read this in a weekend, depending
Mm-hmm.
on how much time you have.
Mm-hmm.
It's 47 questions and answers. I don't think a single answer to a question is more than 700 words. You
Yeah.
could just open the book, and it's everything from how do I know I'm trans to how do I deal with looking for a job as an out trans person to what does it mean to be an ally? Like it covers a
Mm-hmm.
lot of territory.
Mm-hmm. It does. And you're right. That's the other thing I loved about the book is that it's not an ongoing story. It's not sound bites, but it's kind of like a sound bite. I need to know this. Let me look in there's the chapter for that. And so
Yeah,
wherever you're at in your journey, even if you're partway there, I think going back and reading the first part will validate probably your experience or help you
yeah.
improve where you're
Mhm,
at and also
mhm.
give an idea of where to go.
And I think it's a great book for people who have trans people in your life, whether they are
Absolutely.
your family or in your circle of friends, or they live in your
Mm-hmm.
neighborhood, or they go to
Mm-hmm.
your church, or wherever you happen to worship. If they're in your workplace, if you see them at the grocery store, if you just want to know about trans people and you want to be an ally, it's a book that really lets you into what our lives are like. It's not so much the nuts and bolts of transition and being a transgender person as it is what happens in the middle, what happens in our lives, what we go
Mm-hmm.
through, what we think about, and what we worry
Mm-hmm.
about. Yes, there are a couple of like, this is going to happen and that's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly it is life in the process, not how to do the process.
Right, because that's an individual thing anyway. And it has
Totally.
everything to do with, where you live and where you come from. And I
And what you can do based on where you
yes.
live.
Yes, yes, and how to navigate the workplace. I thought that was a really great part of the book is, if you're not already trans going into a job, I loved how you said that, be upfront because the last thing you want is to, I loved how you said this. Like, so just suppose that you show up as Joe and you get the
In the
job
interview
and then you came
process,
in as Jolene later. It's like, that's not cool.
that's going to cause you to have problems. Like,
Yes.
and I have to say this all the time. I'm like, if you're not going to tell them that you're trans when you're interviewing, that's fair. Know that you're going to need to come out at some point later on, but it should not be on day one.
Mm.
It shouldn't. If you know you're going to be out at work, be out in interviews.
Yes. Yes. Because there are some companies that can use that as you lied on your application and
Absolutely.
and that could be like a really legal reason to fire you, even though they may be, you know, f- doing it for other reasons, they still would have a legal
Absolutely.
stance.
Fred.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you feel safe enough to be honest, please do that.
Yeah.
Um, you're going to have more success at bigger companies than smaller companies,
Mm-hmm.
just because they have more established practices and principles, and there might be more people like us than you think.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to do you some favors. It is hard to interview as a trans person because you're always wondering, especially when it's obvious. I'm obviously trans. Like, I don't pass as male or female. I pass as a trans person, someone that you'd see on the street and be like, I think they're trans. You're correct. I am. Right. And
Ding
so
ding.
you just, and for me, I use it as a chance to be like, tell me about how you support LGBTQ plus people in the workplace,
Mm-hmm.
specifically trans people. Because as someone who's interviewed hundreds of people and interviewed for quite a few jobs myself, I do not shy away asking the interviewer tough questions.
Good.
Because if they
Yes.
can't answer my tough questions, they don't deserve my ability to work there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You're right. You're right. So as far as navigating the journey,
Yeah.
it's not always safe. as we talked about before we started this. So
Yes, in our pre-show
let's
chat.
our little pre. I love that. So as I told you before we got came on, the very first thing I thought of when I knew that the election had not gone the way I had wanted it to go was I felt
Right.
dread and
Yeah.
concern for the trans community because you guys in the last several years we talked about that it has been horrific um, for your life and for your
Mhm.
path. And so can we talk a little bit about that as far as like where we're at, how you feel like the trans community is safe or not safe, and then and where you're landing now, even for yourself.
Yeah. Like let's make no mistake, the
Hmm.
election results are a disaster for trans people.
Yes.
Uh in as I told you in our little pre-show chat, our little session, get ready. I think every year for the last 3 years has been a record-breaking year of anti-trans legislation across the United States at the state level, right? Not at the federal level, at the state level, right?
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, much of that has been challenged in the courts and overturned, but not all. Some places like Texas and Florida come to mind, right? So we come into this election already with trans people in the wrong spotlight, a spotlight that we don't want to have. I promise you that. We
Hmm.
would like to just go to the grocery store and get our latte and go
Right.
to work and go home.
Hmm.
That's it. That's the trans agenda. Be like you. Go to brunch, maybe. I don't
Yeah.
know. Walk our dogs.
Yep.
And then Trump comes into the election and makes that a huge talking point. The entirety of the GOP makes it a huge talking point. And
Hmm.
I think while we're here, you and I didn't discuss this, but I'm going to drop into this one for a
Hmm.
moment. What makes this possible is the use of trans people in sports as a wedge issue,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And for any people of your listeners that might be aware, a wedge issue is an issue where you kind of make something up and use it to sort of push people towards something else,
Right.
right? So the GOP finds trans people quite unpopular and a great talking point that energizes their bases. And what gets people in the middle or on both sides of the aisle matter than unfairness, particularly in women's sports,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So quite a few states enacted trans sports bans for trans women. They pretend like trans men don't exist, by the way, so it doesn't really include them. But trans women get banned from sports. Let me tell you something. There are something like 500,000 collegiate athletes in the United States across all universities, across all divisions. Do you know how many trans people are competing in collegiate sports?
Nope.
And I'm using that to reference at an elite level or above, less than 40 across the nation, less than 40.
Wow.
That's a ratio of 1 to 0.00008.
Wow.
Now, in every state that banned trans kids from sport, do you know how many kids were playing sports in those states that were trans? The average is zero. The high side of that average is one.
Oh my goodness.
So it's manufactured rage. And let me be really honest. If you're upset about the idea of trans people in sports, it's not really a thing that's happening, number one.
Hmm.
Number two, everybody deserves to play sports. And even when we do play sports, we don't win very often. It's because we won one or two things that you all didn't like,
Hmm.
right? Furthermore, what you're really saying is under the guise of I care about fairness in women's sports is that you don't actually. If you cared about fairness in women's sports, you'd be working to make sure women had equal access to
Right.
opportunities in sport, equal funding. You'd be making sure that there was no threat of sexual assault,
Right.
right? Equals like all of that stuff would be your priority because dealing with me playing soccer at an elite level changes zero. And
Hmm.
if you've allowed that to sway what you think about trans people, you have been fooled into hating a group of people who are not the problem.
Hmm.
And it worked beautifully for the GOP,
Hmm.
right?
Yep.
He spent 215 million in television ads in his campaign on trans people, which is by far the largest sum of money he put into any bucket. Not he put more money into that than into anti-abortion, put more money into that than getting rid of illegal immigrants, put more money into that than the economy.
That's crazy.
Trans people over an issue that doesn't exist. And that doesn't account for radio, that doesn't account for the internet. So, like, This manufactured rage is over nothing.
Mm,
Honestly, nothing. We are 1% of the population. There's
mhm.
a couple of million of us in the United States, and almost none of us play sports. And yet, the nation has been tricked into hating us for existing when we're not even doing the thing that they say that we've done.
Right.
So that's the environment we come into this election in terms of safety.
Hmm.
So the trans community is in a panic, rightfully so.
Sure. Sure.
Fortunately, we have quite a few states that are blue states that are safe for trans people. For example, I live in Virginia. And though we have a Republican governor, you can only be a governor. You can't be a governor in consecutive roles. So he will be out in 2 years. We have two Democratic senators. One was just reelected. We have a majority in the House of or the General Assembly in the state of Virginia in terms of Democrats. And we've enshrined just about every law you can think of, other than that we're a sanctuary state benefiting the LGBTQ plus community.
Mm,
While Virginia isn't a sanctuary state, it is a safe state to live in, even though it's kind of purple, right?
mm, mhm.
I feel absolutely safe in the city that, and I live in the DC metro area, so I feel absolutely safe. I would recommend many people move here if they can afford it. But you can also look at Roanoke. You can look at Richmond. You can look at anything on the eastern seaboard. It's safe. There are other states out there like that. So we are recommending trans people, if you are in a deeply red state where it is unsafe, you should move.
Mhm.
But we have to acknowledge not everybody can,
Right.
right?
Right.
And if you are lesbian, gay, bi, queer, whatever, and you feel unsafe, you should consider that as well. We
Mhm.
know that marriage equality will probably come under attack,
Mhm.
right? We know that Title IX is probably going to be under attack,
Yep.
anti-discrimination laws, right?
Yep.
So if you feel unsafe where you are, think about moving. Leaving the country is hard because, well,
Yes.
it's quite hard. You can't just move to another country.
Mm-mm.
If you have pets, you have kids, like that becomes that's a problem. You and I talked about a minute ago. You and your
Yes.
4 dogs, like you can't
Yes.
just move to New Zealand.
No.
Um, but you
Mm-mm.
could move within the United States. If you cannot move, then you should assess whether the community you live in currently feels unsafe and you're worried about it being unsafe. If it's unsafe now, there are plenty of organizations out there you can look into. Human Rights Campaign, Points of Pride, if you're trans Lifeline, things like that, that will help you move, even if maybe it might be in the terms of a grant, basically to help you move, making connections. There is a grassroots sort of movement starting to help trans people get to safe places in the United States because regardless of how much we're able to mitigate the damage of a Trump presidency and all the people that he's installed, um, it's going to be tough for us for the next 4 years.
Mhm.
And the biggest worry is not changes to the state level. Those are going to probably stay the way they are. If you're a blue state, you probably not going to change. If you're a red state, you already have laws that are anti-trans laws. You're not going to change that.
Yeah.
Is what can they do at the federal level? Right? That's going to be where it causes the real big problem. So if you're worried about your safety, think about where you can move. It doesn't have to be out of the United States. And
Mhm.
I will say this, having traveled the world a lot, even under a Trump presidency, the United States is still better than most places,
Ah. Well.
right?
Yeah.
In terms of
Okay.
our rights and in terms of humanity.
Uh-huh.
Unless you can move to a first world country and not all of those feel the same as we do. And
Mm.
in order to do that, you have to have the ability to do that, which requires getting a visa, which requires proving to them you have some value other than I need to get out of the US.
Right.
That's just the state of affairs,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah. Good point. I didn't even think about that. You have to qualify why you're coming in there and what you're going to do once you're there. Yeah.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, and this is a thing that all first world countries are doing, including us. That's what it takes to get a visa here. I work in technology, so I work with a lot of people on a visa. You have to be bringing some value. The United States is like, yes, you can legally come.
Huh.
That's going to be the same. And if you're thinking of a second world country, a third world country, like, look, you're going to give up some rights.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's a fact.
It is a fact. Well, it's a depressing fact, but
Look, this is not the timeline that we were supposed to have, Midge.
no, right? I know.
But listen, here's what I can tell all of your people. You have a wonderful community going,
Hmm.
right? build communities locally. How
Yes.
we mitigate the damage is that we work at the local level, the town level, the
Mm-hmm.
county level, the
Mm-hmm.
city level, and the state level. Getting involved, using your voice, helping
Mm-hmm.
uphold the laws that should be in place,
Right.
and building community where you all have a place to collect safely,
Yep.
talk, make plans, organize, right? That is actually what we need more than anything. The
Mm-hmm.
way that we change the state of affairs isn't so much the national presidential election every 4 years,
Mm-hmm.
as much as what we do in our local towns, neighborhoods, communities, and cities.
Yeah.
It's one of the biggest ways and the way you're going to have the most impact over the next 4 years is being a part of getting your town onto the right footing.
Right.
Because the state, while we have federal laws, it is how the states interpret and enforce those laws or not that make the difference.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Good
Get locally
point.
involved, create communities, and then build coalitions. So within your community, look for other communities that you can connect with and work, right? People like you and I, we're LGBTQ plus, we're women. We have those dimensions of diversity, but our activism needs to be intersectional,
Yep.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Black and brown people and indigenous people are part of our coalition,
Absolutely.
right? Bring those groups in, work with them. The more that we work together, the louder our voices. Like, I'll tell you something, when you pull all of the minorities together, there's almost
Mm-hmm.
as many of us as there is of the other side that's not the minority. It's a huge voice. It is when they get us to fight against amongst each other that we all lose.
Mm-hmm.
Don't fight amongst your fellow minority
Mono.
members.
Yeah. Good point. Good point. See, now that's for all y'all listening. That's why this book is so good because because Erica has that ability to take a problem or something that looks like a negative and she turns it into a positive and energizes you. And now I'm ready to sign up for something, but I don't know what I'm signing up for, but she's got me ready to sign up for something.
Okay, great. I've got something for you. I've got a couple
Uh-oh.
things for you.
Okay.
I've been asked, like, well, Erica, what should I sign up with? And I personally am working on something. It's I can't say the name because we have to kind of keep it on the download because it's for trans people.
Uh-huh.
But I'm working on a national resource for people to understand what's happening in their state, states they can get to, resources where they can move.
Yeah,
Right. So
you.
if you want to know that, reach out to me. You can just hit my website and find me. What I would suggest to you, Midge, to talk to your people about is go talk to your friends that are like-minded. I had a
Mhm.
friend reach out to me the other day, a really good friend, and she's like, "Hey, I haven't heard from you since the election. First, I want to make sure you're alive."
Yes.
And I said, "Yes," because I went through a massive doom spiral, and then I had to get activated about what I was going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was telling her my plans and about this thing that I'm setting up, and she's like, "Wow, that's amazing!" And just her and I talking, she came up with ideas for herself that she could involve her friends with.
Oh,
Reach out
nice.
to 3 or 4 of your friends that you think are feeling the same way you are. Find out what's important to both of you. There's something out there doing that in your local community, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I would
Mm-hmm.
say pick something you feel passionate about because you're going to need to sustain that for 4 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right now it's easy, everyone's activated, they all want to do something. What happens 3 months from now
Mm-hmm.
if you're not involved in something passionate? You're not going to sustain it. And then the final thing that I have for people is most people are like, well, what could I do? I don't have any of those skills. Actually, you do. Every skill you use in life needs to be used in community activism, right? If you're a planner or an organizer, whether you're a project manager or you're the scheduler at your local dentist, we need that work. If you're a
Mm-hmm.
salesman and can talk to people, you can talk to people. If you're an educator and you can educate people, you can educate. Like, there is literally no job out there that is not a useful skill you can bring to community building and
Mm-hmm.
coalition building.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to learn a new skill. You might need to take on some information and some knowledge about
Mm-hmm.
community building, but your
Mm-hmm.
skills, whatever they are, incredibly valuable. Just bring that.
Good job. Good job. I love talking to you. Now we're all
Sorry, I am
energized.
so fired up. I hope you all are fired up now too.
Boy, I mean, she's bouncing in the chair. She's like,
Yeah,
she is.
sorry.
No, that's good because that's pulling me in. I'm gonna like,
I'm a fidgety person, but this is like, woo,
woo.
we're going.
Now we're on target. So, what
Yeah,
was
I'm
the
hot. I'm
hardest
hot.
part
I'm
of?
having a hot flash.
Uh-oh. That's what you get.
You get
Welcome to womanhood. Um, so,
exactly.
so what was the hardest part of doing this book for you?
Oh gosh. Um, I think for me, and this is like a hard left turn, so just bear with
Okay,
me for a second.
no
Like
problem.
I need a moment to shift gears. For me, I think it's always planning. Now,
Mm.
you might think, well, Erica, you work in technology. You clearly do some planning. You're a strategist. Like you know how to make plans, right? Yeah, I know how to do that for my job,
Yeah,
but for myself,
yeah,
that's a different story.
yeah.
So it was figuring out what I wanted to say, organizing it and getting started. For me, I'm the person, I have a lot of great ideas. And eventually I get them down to what can we do about them in the physical world, in the real world. But from getting, and you can't see my face. I've got like one
Mhm.
hand over my head and one down at my waist showing the gap, right?
Yep.
Getting from there down to the physical application takes some work for me because I have to like get rid of this and that, add this
Hmm.
and add that. Sort of like, like a witch in front of her cauldron, just stirring ingredients in until something comes out. Um, right from Halloween.
Yeah.
So for me, like figuring out what I wanted to say, how I wanted to say it, what was
Hmm.
pertinent, and like as you know, there's 6 chapters in the book. Organizing all this information by chapter that's kind of
Hmm.
loosely held together was some work. The writing wasn't hard.
Hmm.
It was the keeping it organized, keeping it in a way that made sense in progression. That was
Hmm.
a lot of work for me.
Hmm.
After that, it was frankly waiting. I'm a
Hmm.
very patient person, very patient with people. I am terrible at waiting for things to happen.
Hmm.
If you're going to write a book and you're going to publish it,
Uh-huh.
and you then have to turn that book over to someone to read, and you have to wait there for a week to be like, do
Yes.
they hate my guts? That's hard.
It is hard. That was my worst
You
part.
know?
I do know, and that was, you're right. That was the worst part. And having to review it and look for the mistakes and look for the things that need to be,
Oh gosh,
and then that deadline of this is the final time. If it's not
this is
right
it.
now, it's just going to be not right. You can't change it. And
It's on
I'm just,
you.
oh my
It's your
gosh,
fault.
I was so anal about all of that. So yeah, I understand that too.
I was
So,
so, hold on, hang on. I was so terrified of that
mm,
step you're talking about right there. Like
hmm,
okay, here we are.
hmm,
Like and I'm the type of person where if there's a misspelling and I've read past it twice, I will never catch that.
yeah,
Never.
yeah.
It's gone. My brain just like, bloop, it doesn't exist. That's how I spell that word now. Um, right. And so when I kept getting like that message from the publisher that you and I shared, like, you're almost out of time.
Yeah.
You better make sure it's all right. Like the anxiety I had of like,
Yes.
I don't catch it now.
Yeah.
Potentially the whole universe will read this book and think I'm an idiot.
We're so much alike.
Well, it's quite anxiety driving.
Yes, yes. And that's, that was the whole point because every time I would review it, I would find another mistake. And I'm like, "Oh my
Oh,
God, how many people have read this? All these people have read this. Nobody has found it." And I just knew there was going to be another massive muck up.
that's the wild part. When I find a mistake and I'm not an editor, I'm not
Yeah,
a proofreader, and this is like
right.
our last go through. I'm like, wait,
Wait,
y'all have missed this 6 times?
all of
That's
you?
error inducing.
I know it really was, but but that's the endurance part that I think we bring to our lives, right? That we
Totally.
we are just so ready to make things right. And that's the mindset I think we're going to have now for the next 4 years is that we
Yeah.
find ourselves in panic and fear and almost immobilized, and yet we
Mhm.
have the power to make our corner of the world right. We have the
We
power
did.
to create the community you were talking about, to be in community. And I've said this probably 3 times in a row on my podcast this month is get into community, stay in community,
Hmm.
don't
Hmm.
isolate because it is just overwhelming to go through it with a community, but by yourself, that is just not a great idea.
It's really awful. As someone in the trans community, I can say that most of us start off by ourselves. It's
Mm-hmm.
when we find community of like-minded individuals that we
Mm-hmm.
finally feel seen and alive.
Mm-hmm.
I took on a little sister, for lack of better words, about a year ago, a
No.
trans little sister,
Mm-hmm.
and talk about doing this work in my book, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we have a tradition in the trans community, and particularly the queer community, of handing on information to those that come after this, as you're
Mm-hmm.
aware. Kind
Mm-hmm.
of what we're doing right here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she had been out for a year as trans, had never spoken to another trans person in on video, in real life, or whatever.
Wow.
And sort of collecting her from the wild was quite an experience for
Mm-hmm.
me
Mm-hmm.
and for her. And getting her onto the right path, getting her to making more connections, to finding more friends, to uncovering the things that she had been doing that maybe aren't in her best interest as a trans person, because, you know, we don't always get our information from reputable sources.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I got to watch her blossom
Mm-hmm.
and take on a new life and become more of herself than before. And that's the importance of community,
Mm-hmm.
right? When you're existing in your little bubble by yourself, it's very lonely. It's very difficult. You have no one to help you step out of what's going on. You have no one to encourage you. You have no one to commit to commiserate with. You need that. You need that right now. You will
Mm-hmm.
need that for the next 4 years. Build your bubble. Don't worry about being in an echo chamber. Find the people that you can confide in and trust in
Mm-hmm.
and who will show up for you. That's vitally
Yes.
important. And
Yes.
one reason that's vitally important is that the way this all works for the GOP is that they are expecting us to be demoralized. They're expecting us to be depressed. They're expecting us to go and hide and give in.
Mm-hmm.
They are not prepared for us to not do that,
Mm-hmm.
period. When you continue to show up,
Mm-hmm.
when you continue to, and this one's really important. I was reading about this today. The rule of law is still in play. Despite what he has said, and he's all about bluster, and the people that he's nominated are all about bluster, the rule of law still exists. And what matters is that we continue to ask for and advocate for that and how we talk about it. He
Mm-hmm.
can't delete entire departments of the government because that requires an act of Congress, right? That
Mm-hmm.
requires a supermajority of Congress to get rid of the Department of Education. He can make it difficult for it to work. He cannot get rid of it, right? That's us continuing to uphold our government and our laws. And so I'm going to say something that might be a little controversial for your
Oh,
crowd,
go
but
ahead.
bear with me. Your mantra for the next 4 years should be do not obey in advance.
Oh, yes. I love that. Yes.
Do not self censor yourself. Say what you need to say. Be safe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Don't leave it unsaid,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Do not be intimidated, right?
Mm-hmm.
And show up for the people in your community. Continue to speak out, continue to show up. What I need you to do that's different from the last round of this in 2016 is we got to get beyond the march. We
Mm-hmm.
need people to get active in their
Mm-hmm.
communities, stay
Mm-hmm.
active in their communities for 4 years, not show up to a march on Washington once and call it a day.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Get
Right.
out, get active, talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors, get involved, find ways to help people and get involved. That's how you're going to make a difference.
Right. I love that because, everybody gets all fired up about the march and about being around all those people, and then they go home and do nothing. And so
It's like
nothing
I went to the
changes.
march
I went to the march. I
once.
supported our.
And let me be real clear. March and protests have their place
Yes.
inside
Yes.
an organization. They
Yes.
cannot be the only thing you do. I would
Right.
rather you support your local homeless shelter, your local women's shelter, get involved with your county, whatever local government,
Yes.
become part of a party, than go to a march. Please go to the march. Don't stop at the march.
And people,
Show up at home.
that's right. That's right. And to show up at home, there's a group called Defense of Democracy, and they are all
Yeah.
about making the schools safe for the LGBTQIA plus kids, and also eliminating the banning of books. And it's a very narrow focus, but because we need the books in the schools for us to know the right history and to learn about all the marginalized community. And so
Yes,
banning books is evil and makes us
it
stupid.
is. Mhm.
And we can't
Oh,
be stupid.
we can't be stupid. One other thing for you that you might hear about, and you might be like, is that going to do any good? Call your local representatives,
Yeah.
go and speak at community meetings, regardless of the makeup of that
Mm-hmm.
board being red or blue.
Mm-hmm.
In
Mm-hmm.
particular, call your congressman, call your state representative, call your General Assembly members, because you know what? They are required by law to have someone sit on that phone, receive those phone calls, log that stuff. Who has a different job? The more that we call in, the more that we sign petitions and write letters as a part of our process, the more they cannot deny how unpopular this is going to be. And the thing you
Right.
need to remember, most people in government cannot afford to ignore their constituents if they want to be reelected.
That's right. And that brings us to the part of voting.
Vote.
If you sat this one out because you thought it was hopeless or you thought it was a non-issue, look what happened. We have to
Mm-hmm.
vote in every election because it comes down to a really close, and I was telling this to
It
family
does.
members who didn't like either candidate. And I said, well, then choose the one that doesn't want to take away my marriage. Choose the one that doesn't want to kill my friends. Choose the one that isn't, yeah, has some kind of moral compass.
Choose the one that's not going to tank the economy. Choose the one that's not going to
Exactly.
make things worse in Gaza or Ukraine. Choose the
Exactly.
one who's not going to talking about taking away other people's rights.
Exactly. However, that worked halfway for me.
It did.
It did. And
And I'll tell
so,
you, Midge, we Harris had 73 plus million votes cast in this election, and they're still counting. Trump
mhm.
came in at 76. This was not a runaway. This
Yeah, they
was
wanted
not
to
a
make it so,
mandate.
but it's not. Yes.
It's not. This was quite
Yep.
close, right?
And she
Quite
didn't have that
close.
long to get it together. So,
In 3 months, she ran an incredible campaign.
she did.
So
She
please vote.
did.
And one of the things that I'm two things that I've been talking to people around this. Please show up to vote. It's really important
Hmm.
in primaries, in your local vote
Hmm.
down ballot.
Yep.
Vote at the top of the election. If you are participating in scapegoating a particular part of the Democratic coalition for this election, you're taking the wrong step. You're going in the wrong
Yep.
direction.
Yep.
Two things that were in play in this election: racism
Hmm.
and misogyny.
Yep.
Some people couldn't stomach voting for a woman or a
Hmm.
black woman, and
Hmm.
they might not have called themselves part of the GOP,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Younger men came out in bigger droves. 63% of the vote of the total votes cast were by white people. This is a problem that we have created. This
Yep.
is our work to do, not our Black and Brown community members,
Right.
not Indigenous people, not trans people or LGBTQ plus people. We all but voted in a block,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
This is our work to do as people who are part of the white community. And if that offends you, you
Hmm.
need to take a look inside and understand what internalized racism you need to work through. This can be wildly important.
Yeah.
Point number two for people. We had 166-ish million people vote in this election. In the last one, it was, I think, 173. So
Mm.
that's 7 million more.
Hmm.
There are potentially 250 million Americans who could have voted. That's 100 million people who did not. Now, not all are eligible to vote because of federal crimes, things like that. But let's say 75% of them were that
Hmm.
chose not to vote.
Hmm.
They're choosing not to vote is also sort of choosing for whatever the outcome winds up being.
Right.
One thing we have to get better about is leaving the $10 words behind and talking to those people who don't vote normally and figure out what it will take to get them to register and to show up to vote. That's how we avoid this problem in the future.
Hmm.
And when they're worried about the price of eggs, well, we need to take a moment to talk to them about what a tariff is. And if we put
Yes.
a tariff on everything like Trump has asked for,
Yep.
I'm here to tell you all
Yep.
that the people who pay for tariffs are the consumers in the country where the tariff is levied. It's not paid, it's not going to be paid on that TV you get from China. It's not going to be paid by China. It's going to be paid by American companies who will pass it on to American consumers.
That's right.
We all will pay those tariffs that
Yep.
he was selling,
Yep.
right? And I recently saw a Google search going through the roof on what is a tariff after people voted. People
Hmm.
who voted for him voted to increase the price of those goods they consume every day and don't realize it because he's not going to have any luck getting China to pay those tariffs. It's going to be us buying them
Just
from Walmart.
That's right. Yeah.
right? And so if we don't explain that to people who are worried about the cost of their eggs or their milk or their construction materials or their car loan or the cost of gas, we have to help them understand how the economy and the flow of products works into this country. If you're
Mm-hmm.
worried about your access to healthcare and you voted
Mm-hmm.
for Trump because he's anti-Obamacare, Obamacare is known as ACA. And if you're on ACA and you voted for Trump,
You
he's
just
going to
said
kill
goodbye to you.
ACA because
That's
he's
right.
nicknamed it Obamacare.
Yep. That's right.
Understand who you're, so we have to get out there and help those people new to voting, or maybe who don't vote often, who have real concerns in your community. Ask them what their concerns are, explain them to them in ways that are approachable for that community. We cannot be the party that continues to use $10 words and gives a lecture, a graduate level lecture on the economy. We need to say your eggs are going to be more expensive
That's right.
because if we migrant workers make up 66% of people who work in dairy factories,
Mm-hmm.
though many of the materials they need to feed those chickens in order to produce those dairy or produce chicken, for
Mm-hmm.
example, come from out of the country. Tariffs
Mm-hmm.
on those products mean that becomes more expensive, means your eggs become more expensive.
Yeah.
That's how to have that conversation for the person who's worried about the economy and doesn't know what they're voting for.
Right. Right. And I had this discussion the other day with my wife that, everybody's was saying, well, the economy's not good. And we're like, no, but look at the stock market, look at the job security and all this stuff. But I said, not everybody has a stock market. I mean, you've got people who don't have enough money to have a retirement plan. They don't have enough money to have a savings account. They are only bringing in the money that they can make, and they really don't see that the economy is better. And so I think
No, they
as
don't.
the party also needs to remember we're not all lawyers, and up here with y'all, we're down here with very little money that doesn't always come together. And they've got to get
Yeah,
really, really realistic about how they market their policies, because just making the economy better by looking at the stock market has nothing to do with most of us.
right. Do you know who the stock market helps?
Well, I would say the rich.
People like me who are in technology,
Ah,
people who are lawyers, people who have a 401k,
yeah,
people who have an investment account. It
yeah,
helps Elon Musk. It helps um,
yeah.
every politician. It helps, um, name a tech person, name
Mm-hmm.
a big business person.
Yeah,
It helps them. It
yeah.
helps only really their senior leadership.
That's right.
I, as a 401k, I don't have enough to retire on. My 401k increased $10,000 in the last 2 weeks. That's not going to pay more than a month or two of bills eventually down the
That's
road.
right. That's right.
Most people don't have that.
Right.
We've been sold on this idea, the American dream, that anybody can be anything and they too can be wealthy and make it. And to some degree, I guess that's true.
Yeah.
But it's also been used to sell people on this idea that, the billionaire tech bros of the world are just like you.
Mm-hmm.
They're not just like you. Not a single one of them started without investment money,
Right.
without the clout to get the investment money,
Right.
without degrees in hand or helping hands. They're not like you and I. They will never, the person who's going to be driving our economy, it seems, Elon Musk, has so
Mm-hmm.
much money that his great, 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 great grandchildren will never need to have a job. How is that person in touch with what our farmers need?
Exactly.
How
Exactly.
is that person in touch with what our rural communities need? I lived in a rural community.
Mm-hmm.
I know what it means to cut entitlements there when we lose Social Security, when we lose access to Medicaid, we no
Mm-hmm.
longer have a food bank.
Yeah.
That's what's coming.
Yeah.
And that's what happens when you think about the stock market
Yeah.
and you somehow imagine you're a part of that. If you don't have $100,000 plus in the stock market, it's not doing you any favors.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got to let go of that idea that it's for everybody and it's something that everybody has. That's what they want you to think, as if it's within your reach.
Yeah.
It is not, unless you happen to have already earned that money.
That's right. That's right. Oh, we could talk forever, Erica. I love
Yes,
spending time with you. I do. I do.
me too. I love talking to you.
Yay. Is there anything about your book that we haven't talked about that is a
Oh
really
gosh.
important part and you would like to bring it out before we have to close?
Sure. None of the things that we just discussed for the last 30 minutes are in this
That's
book.
right. But that's just how brilliant she is. She pivots and we talk about relevant
Yeah.
things.
That's just today. That's just like the last 10 days,
That's right.
right? It's a lot of learning and education on my part over the last couple of years, but that wasn't the
Yep.
book.
Yep.
This I think what's important for you to know about this book is at a time like this,
Mm-hmm.
a community that represents 1% of America has been made the scapegoat.
Mm-hmm.
And you've watched it. If you've been seeing the news,
Mm-hmm.
hasn't just been on Fox News. You've
Mm-hmm.
watched ABC, you've watched
Mm-hmm.
CNN, you've watched CBS say
Mm-hmm.
maybe we shouldn't have supported trans people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we lost the election. That's not the way we lost this election.
Nope.
That's obeying in advance again, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this book is crucial to understanding who we are. It humanizes us. It's not a lecture. It's
Mm-mm.
fun. It's silly. It's sad. It's
Mm-hmm.
approachable. It's easy to read. If you're not sure about trans people and you want to know, this is a great book to read because it's not going to challenge you in that way. The way it will challenge you is being able to ask yourself, do I see this person as a regular human being just like me, just trying to get through their day? And if you
Mm-hmm.
ask yourself that question, I hope after reading my book, the answer will be, yeah. And this
Mm-hmm.
is ridiculous that we're doing
Mm-hmm.
this with our time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Amen. And that picture that kept floating around from the other campaign where there was this Amazon person on a really small girls team, that is not happening. That is an AI generated
It's not real.
stupid thing. It's not real. It's not happening, and we all need to get into
Mm.
the reality of life.
Okay. I do need to talk about one that is out there that is real.
Okay.
If you're looking up the trans swimmer that won a race
Mm-hmm.
from 2 years ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
Reminder, the person who's allowed us about her also came in fifth, tied with her for fifth in the race that she's complaining about. Four other cisgendered women beat them both. Leah Thompson lost that race that we're all upset about behind four other people and tied the person who's the loudest about it,
Yeah.
right? And when you look at her, a lot of the photography is shot in such a way that makes her look giant. But if you stood Leah Thompson up against our, I don't know, Olympic athletes that just won a lot of medals this summer, she
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't stand up. They're bigger, they're
Mm-hmm.
stronger, they're
Mm-hmm.
faster, and they're cisgendered women.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's the truth. Erica, you are a gem. You're a gem to me and to the community. And I'm so, so happy that our paths crossed. And I'm so proud of you for doing this book. It is brilliant. I love every bit of it. And I'm so proud of you. So, and in the future, if you have other things that are relevant, or maybe not, you just want to come and
I just
talk.
want to hang out. Yeah.
You just want to hang out. We will
Hey, if
do
you
it
don't have a
again.
guest for a week, you can clearly see I can
That's right.
pivot.
That's right. Pitch in. It's often that I don't have a guest, but when I do, I'm so
I
glad
know how
that
that
I
goes.
booked you because this is just brilliant and I'm so proud of you and I can't wait to and I am like on the last chapter. That's but
Oh, okay, that's a good one.
oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I love being on your podcast. I love to know there's a community of people like you out there,
Mm,
part of my community, part of a community of faith and worship.
mm,
It's wonderful to me. I still have that as well. I was just
good.
talking about to my wife, a friend mentioned their church that they're belonging to that has
Mm-hmm.
quite a good LGBT community. I was thinking, oh, maybe we should go to that one.
Mm-hmm.
And stick together, people. Stick with
Yeah.
each other.
Yes.
Don't
Community,
lose faith.
community, community.
Put yourself out there.
Yes. Yes.
Get to
Thank
work.
you. Thank you. Thank you. Get to work, everybody. So, thank you again. And I'm going to have the link to the book in the show page, guys, at empoweredmidge.podbean.com. And you can see all of the ways that you can connect with Erica and also to get her book. All right, everybody.
Yes.
Thank you so much for coming. And we will continue to do the work. Check out the Facebook group, Gay with God, where we do a monthly Zoom group entitled My Faith Journey. We're actually meeting tonight. If you want to be a part of that group at some point, go to Gay with God on Facebook, join the group, and answer all the questions. We've talked about safety today, and we want to make sure that the people that are coming to our group are not going to be disruptive or not really going along with the topic. So please answer all the questions, and I'd appreciate that very much. If you are listening to this podcast and are questioning whether you can be gay and be in a relationship with the God of your understanding, if you identify as LGBTQIA+, or not even sure if you're gay, God has always been within you, even when you didn't know it. You have always been gay with God. Thank you, everybody. Stay tuned to see how you can join the Gay with God community. And as always, you are loved. I want to invite you to become a part of the Gay with God community. How can you do that? Stay connected by messaging me your thoughts and comments in the comment section under the downloads of the show on the Gay with God show page. Subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen and share so we can increase our community outreach and be a light to those who are struggling to claim their faith. Consider being a sponsor so I can highlight your service in our community. We are all worthy of respect and a relationship with the God of our understanding. I want to thank you in advance for supporting this podcast. Together, we as a community will keep this show visible and our community stronger. Deep gratitude to my friend Tim McClendon of Tim McClendon Music for allowing me to use an excerpt from Interlude 4, a song found on his CD entitled Sundance.